Hey, it's Steve Zotke at the 2024 Miller Meet. I'm here with Tom Barbour. We're going to talk about an exciting car. It's his first time appearance at this event, and I think you'll like it. This thing has an interesting history. So tell us about this car, Tom.
Started out as the second Miller front drive. Probably the first race was 1925 at Indy. Kind of an average performance. Was sold to Packard car company for research. Then finally came back to the racing community in 27, and then raced prolifically for the next 15 years actually. Finally ending up in the hands with Frank Brisko, who was a driver, mechanic, machinist, and eventually a team owner.
So it's common in 1930 when they changed formulas, as some people call it the junk formula. I don't think you and I necessarily agree with that, but they went to two-man cars. So this car was converted, wasn't it? A lot of Miller cars were too, weren't they?
Very much so. It's all they could do to keep them running. You had to have your driving mechanic on
right
board.
So this was converted to a two-man car, then converted back.
Yes.
So how long did this car run till?
Actually, think about this, from 1925 to 1949. So it made 16 Indianapolis 500 appearances. Did not qualify for all of them. It qualified though for 14 races, which we think is a record.
And tell us about some like the bodywork changes and what was involved with that.
Okay.
Because we're showing photos of here on the overlays here. Like when was it Bennett Hill? I think drove it originally.
Initially, he had the wonderful Bennett Hill scowl. There's very few photos of Bennett Hill ever smiling, and he was not happy with the car, and I'm not quite sure why. And we were discussing, the various modifications and body modifications. The most significant was, going to the Maserati style body, but we'll get to that later. The two-man car modifications pretty much were typical, where they'd modify the front grille, they'd widen the frame. In many cases, I think the original Myron Stevens bodywork was retained. But in the late 30s, when the Maserati started showing up, everybody was excited about enveloping bodywork. Sheet metal coming over your frame rails, which felt aerodynamically competitive, positive. So many American cars were modified with that type of bodywork. During the war, there was sufficient downtime where many cars were modified even further. By that time, as it goes by, a Maserati 8CLT, you can hear it now, was a team car to this car. Brisko was running, that was 3032 Maserati 8CLT. Frank Brisko had acquired 3030, which is now known as the Lucy Shell Maserati 8CL. And ran that car with Emil Andres as its driver. So during World War II, racing was shut down, cars were improved and modified, and as the United States started winning the war, attitudes changed and we got more realistic about racing again, and people started modifying their cars. This Maserati sat right next to the Brisko, and Frank said, we're going to bike the bodywork like that. We went to Harry Turner in Wisconsin.
Kenosha.
In Kenosha, had Harry and his team build this body, raced it again in 46. Once again, kind of a mid-pack finish at best. And then the car went quiet, but actually got a sponsor in 1949, Frank Lynch Motors out of Chicago, and this is the livery it's in right now. It's never changed.
So what has this car been doing since 1949?
Well, that's a fun story in itself, but I still have to tell you about the Brisko engine first. During its racing, Brisko, being who he was, designed his own engine, and that engine was highly influenced by the Maserati in his garage, which means he started with a Miller engine, changed the crankcase design to a barrel crankcase, split it in the center, Our Miller crankcases are one piece.
Yeah.
We had a split crankcase. Then the blocks were aluminum. Miller blocks are iron. And he made aluminum blocks like the Maserati with steel liners. So this particular engine has major Maserati influence, retains a Miller Marine gear tower, and some Brisko modifications too. Most exciting of those are studs going all the way through the blocks, all the way down through the crankcase and the main bearings, and out the bottom of the engine for strength, obviously.
Yeah.
But what a major, undertaking. So a really cool engine, of which there's 3, and this is one of them. Okay, the history of the car after it was retired in 1949. We have a collector in Chicago named Ed Traeger.
Yep.
And he was purchasing sorry old race cars that were forgotten and unappreciated. This was one of them. He put them in enclosed storage and kept them in original condition. The founder of the Harry Miller Club, Dave Eline, heard about this car, knew that it was one of the original Miller front drives, bought the car, took the frame rails out of this car and built a front drive car with original frame rails. He thought.
Yeah.
Even though the frame rails most likely had been changed because the Brisko was a little bit different.
Sure.
But he used them, and this car lost them. But the rest of the car was intact. Mark Dees, our historical author of Miller Dynasty, purchased these parts, put the car back together, and kept it in his house for a decade, in his living room, I'm told. And then George Parker, one of our foundrymen in California, bought the car from Mark, and then I ended up with it. And I kept it for the last 10 years, and I'm finally getting it back out on the ground.